Rob Hudson. I'm a member with the law firm Frost Brown Todd, and I'm one of the volunteers for the Northern Kentucky Bar Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our 2022 Legends Series. Through its Legends Series, the NKBA features members of our profession who've impacted our region through the practice of law. We focus on practice excellence, practice development, ethics, and professionalism. Now, for our live attendees today, if you have questions, send them in via the Q&A feature, and we'll address those at the end of the program as time permits. Today, we're lucky. We have two guests who will be conducting the program. Shannon Egan will be conducting our legend interview. She's an attorney with Dinsmore & Shaw. She's an outstanding commercial litigator with a primary focus on representing financial institutions, mortgage servicers, and credit card companies. She also happens to hold the most coveted board position at the NKBA, the position of immediate past president. She served as NKBA president for nearly 2 years, and under her leadership, the NKBA, we really became stronger, not weaker, during the pandemic. She is a strong, effective leader, I think because she's a great listener, she's a strategic thinker, and at her core, she really cares about people. Now, at this point, I'll turn it over to Shannon to introduce and interview our legend, and I'm going to rejoin later to help us wrap up towards the end of our hour together. Shannon, take it away.
Rob, thank you so much, and thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it. I am going to hope that I can fill Rob's shoes today for just a little while. He's so good at doing this, and I'm just a little bit nervous, so bear with me, but I know that Mark is going to do a great job here. Let me introduce Mark. Mark Ogle is with Graydon. He's been practicing for more than 35 years in Northern Kentucky and has helped shape Kentucky's domestic relations law, both with respect to judicial and statutory developments. Since 2006, Mark has been recognized as a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, one of the most prestigious groups of family lawyers in the United States, where he currently serves as also the immediate past president, coveted position. Mark is a frequent presenter on a wide range of topics, has helped lead the family law sections of the American Bar Association, Kentucky Bar Association, and the Northern Kentucky Bar Association. And just a couple of personal facts. I worked with Mark at Graydon, and I find him to be a wonderful attorney, very knowledgeable, cares about his clients, a great friend, and I'm happy, Mark, that you're here with us today to talk about your practice.
Well, thank you, Shannon. That was very kind of you to introduce me with all those things that have somehow got on my resume. I don't know how.
All of your hard work and perseverance. I know where that came from. So, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what jobs you had before you became a lawyer? Okay.
Well, I'm happy to. Most of the people I think that are on this Zoom today probably know a little bit about me because I've heard in the past that I like to talk about myself quite a bit. So I probably have said this to everybody before, but I grew up in Western Kentucky in a really small town called Hawesville. And the thing about Hawesville, there are two important things to know about the area that I grew up in. First, it's named after General Benjamin Halls, who was a direct descendant of, or Al Halls, our former Northern Kentucky Bar Association lawyer. Al Halls is a direct descendant of General Benjamin Halls. And when my city was celebrating its bicentennial, they invited Al Halls to come down and be part of it. Unfortunately, he wasn't well enough to do it at that point. But so I grew up in a town of about 800 people. Somehow got out of that area and got to Center College, where I played basketball and baseball and on the golf team for a while, and ended up at Chase Law School, thinking the whole time that I would end up back in Hancock County or Hawesville to practice law, and never left Northern Kentucky. So that's been 37 years ago now. So the other thing I wanted to tell you about my hometown is Lewisport, Kentucky is the next smallest or next biggest town in my county. And this is interesting fact that Abraham Lincoln's first trial was in Lewisport, Kentucky, where he was charged with a crime and he represented himself because he was operating a ferry across the Ohio River without a license. And he got charged with a misdemeanor crime. He defended himself. And real quick, I'll tell you, the defense was that I wasn't operating a ferry across the Ohio River, which is what the statute said. I was only going halfway and delivering people to a barge halfway across the river, and he was acquitted from that. And after that, he was given law books and became a lawyer. That's how you did it back then. So interesting little fact about where I came from. So
It is. And do you still have family back in Hallsville?
I do. My dad still lives in the same town. All my uncles, everybody is still there. Primarily, most of my family's, my brothers and sisters have moved away, but
Okay. And we've
Yep.
talked about this before. I have some family members pretty close to Hawesville too. And when you said your home city, I thought city, is there more than one red light there? I'm not sure.
and now Shannon, there are 2 stoplights now in Hallsville. Not sure why. I'm really not sure why, but there are 2 stoplights now in the town. There are actually more people in the subdivision I live in now than the county that I grew up in.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, it's
crazy.
beautiful down there. I know that. So Mark, expanding on that a little bit, what made you end up pursuing a career in the legal field?
You know, that's a good question. I thought you might ask me that, so I kind of gave some thought to that a little bit. And you know, and if anybody's looked at the website, my website at Graydon, and my story on there, you'll know that I'm influenced, highly influenced by my grandmother. And I spent a lot of time with her when I was a child. And one of the things that my grandmother impressed upon me when I was young was and she told me stories about her great grandfather, whose name was Robert Kelly. And Robert Kelly was an attorney and a senator in the state. And she kept telling me stories that intrigued me to the point where I had an immediate sort of interest in law as a young person. And she told stories about him. And what she said is that back when he was a lawyer, lawyers were considered, and I'm hoping we can get back to this at some point, but lawyers were considered special people in the community. They weren't just there for the legal advice. They were there to solve people's problems in the community, whether it be legal or not. They were looked up to and respected. And I wanted to be that, so that it was implanted into me when I was a young man, a young kid, and then sort of followed that path along the way. I really still wasn't sure I was going to be heading into law school until my senior year at Center College, when it kind of came down to me trying to decide when I'm going to go get an MBA, pursue a banking career, or am I going to head to law school and head down that route? And I didn't flip a coin, but I made the decision to go to law school. So that's how I got here. Yeah.
And on what you said about lawyers being special people in the community, I think that that's one of the NKBA's goals, or is to reach out to people in the community, help people understand their legal rights, put on seminars. It's all about education and helping our community,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So what fields have you worked in the legal area?
So probably like everybody on this call, you start out out of law school doing what you're told to do.
Yes.
Right. So I've had many opportunities and detours and turns on the path that I'm going to call my legal career to get to where I am now. So immediately out of school, I was doing everything I could. And I had my first job was actually with Asa Rouse and Mills, Asa Rouse and Mills Rouse and Nick Benson in Walton, right? And I was helping Nick defend cases. I was helping Mills with personal injury, and there's been a lot of lawyers come through that Asa Rouse, Nick Benson portal, right? But that was my first job out of school, and I parlayed that into a job with Gordon Hood at Heckerman and Hood, and some people will remember that, which later merged to Strauss and Troy. And hence I was at Strauss and Troy. Things moved from there to, some people might remember this, that Jay Fawcett and I started our firm. We left Strauss and Troy as young associates. How brave that must have been. Don't know why I did that, but we did. And it was Fawcett and Ogle. And in fact, Jay's oldest daughter, who is I just love to death, thought her name was Meredith Fawcett and Ogle for the longest time, because that's how we answered the phone, right? But those were great days. We were starving, but practicing hard and working all day and having a great time. And from there, things just kept growing and growing. And so I ended up in my own private practice for over 20 years. And just recently, as you know, Shannon, I joined the Graydon team 4 years ago. And so that's how I kind of got to this, where I am today along the way, right?
Yeah.
But I moved from securities fraud work, from anything to securities fraud work to personal injury for a while, and then 20 plus years ago, family law. And I've been doing family law ever since. Right.
And what part of the broad area or broad category of family law intrigues you the most? What was it that kept you in that line?
What I think convinced me that this is the area I wanted to be in. It's twofold. One, I got divorced myself, right? And realized at the process, I had counsel and good counsel, but I realized that there weren't a lot of family lawyers focused, a lot of lawyers in Northern Kentucky at that time, years and years and years ago, primarily focused on family law. It was a practice that everybody was doing sort of alongside their personal injury and alongside their criminal defense and alongside other things. And it wasn't a primary focus. And so I wanted to do that. If you look around the state, there's a significant bar in Louisville. There's a significant bar in Lexington that is primarily focused on family law. And if you cross the river, it's been that way for a long time in Cincinnati. So Northern Kentucky is really making great strides, and there are a great group of primarily focused family lawyers now in Northern Kentucky, which are providing great services to the people of Northern Kentucky who need it. All right. The other reason I did it is I recognized that, and this is something I like to tell people now, the older I get and the longer I practice, the more I realize is that, I enjoy working with people and helping them. Okay. I was doing securities fraud work for the longest time, for not a long time, 4 or 5 years. Never saw a human really, took some depositions, but it was all about emails and statements and what was, it was a misrepresentation. There wasn't any real human connection or part to that. And I didn't really care for that. And when I got into the family law piece, you're clearly working one-on-one. It's a very personal practice of law, and I enjoy it. I tell people now, I've started to change up my elevator speech a little bit here and there. And I'm wavering back and forth between, I really like what I get to do. I get to help really, really good people at the very worst time of their life. And I enjoy helping people through that. Or I've been telling people sometimes that I'm a family reconstruction engineer, that I am just helping people rebuild their families in different ways. Right. And so that's sort of the flavor for why I like doing what I do. Right?
And one of the things that stuck with me after when we worked together, Mark, is you said, one of the things you love is holding a client's hand in one of the worst parts of their life and getting them to the other side and letting them know that there is a better day at the end of this terrible case or situation.
Right. Shannon, I take a lot of pride. If people will, and this goes for everybody, a lot of people that are on this Zoom today, I'm sure that have the same approach that I do. And we all probably feel the same way. If our clients were capable of actually hearing us and listening to us during the process, we could get them through it a lot quicker and a lot healthier but it's a difficult spot to be in. One of the things I like to say in my consultation a lot of times is that I'm going to give you permission right now to forgive yourself for the things you're going to say and do during this process. Okay. Because you will come out of it on the other side. Hopefully you've grown emotionally and spiritually in every way, so that you can get out on the other side of it and be better than you were going into it. Right.
Yeah.
And I try to keep that focus the whole time, to kind of tie that into a little bit we're talking about ethics today, or professional courtesies. If you look at the code of professional courtesies and the way we are supposed to treat our clients and other attorneys and judges and courts, if that becomes your primary focus and it becomes second nature to you, and you're always treating people with respect, which is what I talked about, divorce with dignity and with some respect, right?
Mhm.
You never really have to look at the code of professional courtesy, because you're always doing it. You're always following up on
Yeah.
it. You're never a reason to raise your voice. There's never a reason to call anybody a name, right? And I try to practice that way, and I think most of the people I practice with do.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that the Northern Kentucky Bar is in general a very professional bar. People are like friends. If you travel, well, I won't call out any places, but I do work in 2 other states, and
Yep.
it's not quite the same for the most part. Okay, Mark, so how do you determine whether you should take on a new client? Do you have any suggestions for newer or younger attorneys, those clients that maybe are going to be good, those clients that maybe you should just tell them to find somebody else?
I have some great suggestions about that, Shannon. I don't always follow them myself, unfortunately, right? But I've been doing this for a very long time, and it wears on you emotionally to be involved in a family law practice, to have a family law practice, if you're not careful how you manage the cases you have and the clients that you take. All right, you take on their issues, and you take on their problems, and you become part of the problem almost yourself a little bit. So a long time, I would say 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to meet with a consultant, because I was really, really worried about what my practice was turning into and how contentious every single thing I was doing was becoming. And what I learned from that consultation was, and it was kind of wild, because the consult came into my office. We grabbed and back then everybody had paper files, right? Now I guess we'd be looking at my laptop and moving my digital files around. But back then we had paper files, and we pulled out every file that I had, and in one side of the room we stacked the files. I think I had 50 open files at that point. And one side of the room we stacked the files that I really enjoyed working on, and there were about 4. And then we stacked the rest of them in the other side of the room, right? And then we which was very eye-opening to me, and we started exploring, why is it that I enjoyed working on these 4 files and not these other files? And this is the lesson I learned from that, is the 4 files that I was working on were allowing me to actually be their family law attorney and counselor. They were doing the work themselves to get better and get through it. They weren't looking to me to make things better necessarily, but to guide them through the process, right? The 40 other files sitting in the other corner were always looking to make me their hammer or their tool, or to make me part of their process in processing their own divorce, right? The same arguments they've been having with their spouses for years, they were trying to play out again inside the case of its own. I still fall into that trap periodically today. I'm trying better to vet clients in the beginning to see whether they are in the position that they can actually help you handle their case and help them grow and get through their process, or are they the ones that are going to expect you to do it all and hand them what they want and be part of the process that they've already been going through with their spouse for all these years, right? So if I could say one thing about young people, don't take the problem case. You don't need it. It'll eat up. Everybody's heard this rule, right? That 20% of your cases eat up 80% of your time. And they're the 20% of the bad cases that'll destroy your practice and your time. Take be critical and be respectful of yourself and choose wisely. We don't have to take every case that comes in our door. I would like to send some of those problem cases down the road, but I don't want any of you guys to get them. Right. Let them have somebody else pick them up. Right. So, but that would be the advice I would give. Look for clients that are in a good spot. And if they're not helped and you want to get involved, help them get to that spot. Get them into some therapy, get them doing stuff they need to do to get through this divorce. It's more than just dividing the assets. That's easy. Everybody can do that. Right.
That's a great lesson, Mark. I love the file dividing story.
Yeah.
Great
Well,
lesson.
I'm not as good at that as I used to. I got better for a while, but I'm not doing so hot right now.
So Mark, when you do have a client, how do you build trust with your client?
So again, this can kind of take us back to some of the model rules of professional conduct as well, or the Kentucky KBA rules of professional conduct that kind of mirror the model rules. Open and honest communication with your client. Don't make promises you can't fulfill. Don't take on more work than you can actually do, right? Be sure you can have the contact with your client one-on-one, and share openly all communications. Now, you got to be careful about that, obviously. I mean, I know we've had this discussion before in other ethics. I have a practice that I like my client to have all the communications that I have. All right. If I get a communication from a lawyer, a lot of times I will forward that communication so that the client is not in the loop, right? You do never, ever want to CC a client on a communication with another lawyer. All right. Yeah, that is a no-no. All right. It's questionable whether you should blind CC them, but I know some people do, which can keep them out. But it's better practice, I think, to forward emails after the fact. But it is essential that your representation with the client is transparent. That the client doesn't feel as if there's anything secretive going on behind their backs or her back, his or her back, with you and the other lawyer, or vice versa. I mean, you want your client to be open with you too, right?
Absolutely.
So that's one way I try to build a trust, is by communicating openly with the client. If we get bad news, or we get a report, or we get a decision on a hearing that's not, you might as well address it right then.
Yeah.
Something that I was taught a long time ago about this is, it's worse. It's kind of like waiting for your dad to get home. My dad was more of the disciplinarian, and my mom would let me know that, that argument I got in with my younger sister was going to cost me later when dad got home. And it was worse waiting for dad to get home than it was actually dad getting home that night. Right. And so when you get the bad news, I think the faster you can process that, the quicker you can get it to your client, the more honest and more trusting they think you are. So don't hold back bad news.
I totally agree, Mark. And it also, stuff like that becomes a weight on your own shoulders. Like you were saying, looking forward to or dreading having to tell your client that. Right. I do remember a lesson I learned, that the file on the corner of your desk, the one you never want to look at, never want to open, make that the first file that you work on that day. Get it out of the way, be done with it. Otherwise, it's going to sit there and grow sprouts like a potato and end up just being a burden in your life and your clients.
It's going to end up keeping you up at night.
Yeah.
It will.
It will. So as far as communicating with your clients, you work in a difficult area where emotions come in, anger. How do you keep your clients informed and provide legal explanations to them when they are in an emotional state?
Yeah, I think you have to constantly be aware. If you're going to do family law, you have to constantly be aware of the position your client is in. And what I mean, their emotional state, where they are. Where they're coming from. And we all have gotten those emails immediately from a client that they have lashed out because there's either been a bad decision or their ex-spouse is doing something and they feel like you're not doing enough You know,
Mhm.
you didn't chop his hand off or anything. You didn't get after him like they wanted you to in a hearing. It's very difficult to be aggressive for no reason, just
Yeah.
because parties want you to be aggressive. It's hard for me to do, but you have to, you know, in order to follow the rules of professional courtesy and the rules of, you know, professional conduct, you kind of almost have to think of it from where they're at, right? I want to lash out as soon as I get a nasty email about me. I'm a competitive guy, right?
Right.
The first thing I want to do is respond back and defend myself and tell them why they're wrong about that. I'm a hell of a litigator. I don't know why you would say something like that. And I want to attack them back. And then, but I've learned over the years that you got to put that aside and you got to come at it from where they're at, and you can respond back to them. And you can respond back to them in a rational, professional, and respectful way, not talking down to them, but recognizing where they're at, listening to what they're saying, and then explain to them, you know, why things happen the way they have happened. So I guess my tip would be never forget where your client's at, right? And a perfect example of that might be if you're representing a lady who has, or a husband, a spouse who has been home primarily raising the children for 25 years or so, and the husband has been the breadwinner, and the skills of the non, or the wife, and the skills of the non breadwinning party are dull in their ability to get into the workforce and make some sort of living after being 25 years not doing that. The fear they have and the anxiety they have sometimes over, how am I going to be able to pay my bills? How am I going to be able to make sure my kids get to college? How am I going to be able to do all those things? Drive a lot of their anger and a lot of their anxiety, which sometimes manifests itself by reaching out to somebody, and the only person left is their lawyer. Right. And so you have to be cognizant of that, listen to that, and respond with some dignity and respect.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. So how can you tell, Mark, when it may be time to withdraw from handling a case?
So that's a really good question, and I'm not very good at that. I think it's pretty easy, but it's harder to, it's easy to understand, and when you should, it's harder to do it.
Yeah.
But when a client is no longer taking your legal advice, it's time. And I used to tell them, and I don't do this anymore, it's a little disrespectful, but if you're not going to listen to me, go hire a cheaper lawyer and don't listen to them. It'll cost you less, right? But I don't do that anymore. It's a little disrespectful. But I just say,
there's ways to say it without saying it.
yeah,
Right?
possibly. But there's if they're not going to listen to you, there's a couple things that you're risking yourself. You're risking some liability, either with your bar complaints or malpractice carrier or whatever might come about by a client not performing as you suggest or as they should. And then second, when they're non-responsive to you. And, you send 5 emails and you don't get a response, or 2 months go by and you've sent a bunch and you've phone called and you're not getting responses back. When cases get stale like that, right? It is a good time at that point to withdraw from that case, right? And move forward. Now, the other thing that I immediately withdraw from cases is when a client blatantly and intentionally lies to me. Because as lawyers, we're representing, and we work with other lawyers, and a lot of the other lawyers know our reputation is important. And a lot of lawyers, I hope, that I work with know and trust that I am telling them the truth, and that I always will, and that I will keep. And when you've been put in a position that jeopardizes your own reputation because of a client's misrepresentation to you, and it was intentional, there's a difference from having a different perception than there is from making a blatant intentional misrepresentation. And if it's intentional, there's no room for continuing to represent that client.
Agreed.
Right.
And speaking of working with other attorneys, how do you stay civil working with other attorneys in what is oftentimes a very contentious area?
You know, Shannon, this may sound weird, but I actually like attorneys, right? I like working with other attorneys. I like this group of people.
Yeah.
I especially like the family law bar. Now, they're not all of them probably like me, and there's probably some that might scream and yell at me periodically, but for the most part, we are a intelligent, caring group of people. And most of us have the exact same goal, which is to help families and help parties through difficult times, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say everybody that we work with is. Not every family lawyer that I deal with, do I believe has the same goal. But
Right.
most of them I enjoy being around. It's hard if you work in the family law circles. It's a little bit of a club, a fraternity as such, right? I mean, we all see each other. A lot of us see each other in the same kind of cases, and it's happening at every level. It happened when I was younger, and as I'm getting older, the cases I'm getting are a little more sophisticated, and they're a little more asset driven. There's more assets involved. But it starts with the young attorneys now. They're seeing the same people, and as they develop, they're going to do the exact same thing. They're going to be working with the same group of people over the next 20 to 25 years. And every time you have a dealing with them, it's not about the one case you're working on. It's about the next 20 years of cases you're going to have.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm at that stage where I'm old. I don't want to admit it, but
Oh, Mark.
if they're calling me a legend at this point for some reason, I think the next step is out to the pasture somewhere where you ride around and you retire and, whatever the horses do out there, but I think along the way up, we all grow up together. One of my very first appellate cases ever, Jim Kruer and I had an incredible, respectful battle at the appellate court. And I'll never forget the argument, right? We were fighting over a child. It was a custody case. And Mr. Kruer is probably on here, I think. I'm not sure. But he showed up at the appellate court, and we were arguing. I look over, and there's not a law book on his table. There was a Bible on his table. And he made a legal biblical argument, and apparently it worked. And I learned something very important. And Jim and I have had many cases since then, and incredible good ones. We've created some law in Kentucky. Some of you guys have probably heard or read some of the cases. Ballinger versus Boone was one of the big ones that we worked on. And I'm not kidding you, it was against Daniel Boone. Only in Kentucky, right?
You might have to expand on that later.
Yeah. Only one of the parties could be named Daniel Boone, but it was. And we had an incredibly respectful argument at the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals made a good decision and created law for us. And that case expanded along the way now to really kind of shape the non-biological third-party rights to children.
Yeah.
And it's kind of expanded from that case on. And but I don't know for sure that Jim and I knew exactly what we were doing, but we did the best we could do, right? And Cheryl Heater was on that case as well, and Tasha Scott actually worked on that too. So it was quite a case. That was the first one. So yeah.
And you've been able to remain good, colleagues, working partners, friends in some cases, notwithstanding a lot of the contention that goes along with these. But have you had a case where an attorney, obviously without naming any names, have you had a case where an attorney did obviously lie to you or withhold evidence that you've asked for or anything like that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
So I think we've all had that, right? I mean, if you've been practicing law anytime at all, you've all had cases where you felt like you've been sandbagged or held back documents, or and it's difficult because you can't, you shouldn't, and the rules of professional courtesy require you not to make the assumption that the lawyer has done that on purpose, and
Right.
that is and in fact, it's a real tough decision as to when and if you should pursue sanctions and how that should be, and probably only if it benefits your client necessarily to do so. At least that's how I feel about it. But I wouldn't name any names. I mean, the cases that I haven't had many. I don't think there are a lot of lawyers that would deliberately, at least that I practice with, would ever withhold something knowing that they have to disclose it. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think what happens more times than not is the client hasn't disclosed it to the lawyer.
Probably true. Yeah.
And that happens more often than I think we all realize. And the client will hold back something and then eventually start to get nervous about it and turn it over, but it should have been turned over 6 months earlier or 3 months earlier, right? And I always give the attorney certainly the benefit of the doubt on that. And so, I have never sought sanctions against another attorney, and I've only had that occur to me one time, and it was I raised an issue in a case that I was attempting to overturn a rule of law that existed currently, and the other lawyer took offense to that because the precedent was clearly against where I was going, but apparently didn't realize that about 6 months later the Supreme Court struck down the precedent and there was a new case. And I was trying to get my case to that. I knew there was a case pending at the Court of Appeals, and I wanted to get my case to the Court of Appeals and jump on that case and join in with it. We had the exact same issue, and it had to do with modification of spousal support payments.
So you had the good faith necessary to seek to overturn established precedent.
Yeah, but I got a motion for sanctions in that case that the judge was, thank God, willing to dismiss. Right.
Good. Thank God.
And 6 months later, I would have won my case at trial level, because the law changed. But that's just how it goes, right?
Mark, have you worked on a case that was particularly difficult to leave at the office that kept you up at night? And if so, how did you handle that? Yeah,
don't we all? I mean, that's the downside of doing family law, is being able to walk out. And my life's pretty much an open book. Everybody that knows me knows I talk about a lot of things, and I'm going to suggest some things for family lawyers here that maybe people don't realize or wouldn't think about. But we're constantly seeking our therapy for our clients. We're constantly knowing what they're going through and how difficult it is for them, and asking them to get help, or at least I am. Right. Mm-hmm. And it might be because I'm selfish. I want them to be in good hands rather than me trying to give them psychological or mental help. Right. I want them to be talking to somebody who's actually really been trained in the area, just not somebody with 35 years of experience of dealing with, mental health issues, so to speak. But one of the things that's helped me tremendously with this, and I'm not ashamed or even concerned about talking about it, is reaching out and having a coach, getting some help, getting some professional help to help you deal with this. If you think about what we do, we listen to everybody's problems every day, all day long, and they throw them on our shoulders like we're the only savior they have. We're the only one that can help them get through this. I don't know how we cannot keep from taking some of that home with us, right?
Yeah.
And learning how not necessarily to compartmentalize, but because that's almost impossible for us, although lawyers are great at it, right? But learning how to place it in the right place, leave it where it needs to be, pick it back up. One of the things I like to talk about is we need to have disinterested compassion for our clients, right? If we get too far in, yeah, then we need to get another lawyer because we've become the client, right?
Right.
So, and we need to be able to have compassion for our clients, but not to the point where we become them, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be able to, and if you need help, I mean, lawyers turn to a lot of different things to help deal with that stress,
Yeah.
right? And we as a group sometimes struggle with depression, alcoholism, all
Right.
kinds of different things, right? So there is nothing to be ashamed of to seek some professional help, and to, we've all lost incredibly dear friends to, especially in the legal field, to depression and suicide issues, right?
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with you. I think that's great advice, Mark.
yeah, so don't be
And
afraid.
that goes for family law and any other kind of law. There's pressures in any other
Yep.
the same way. Yeah. So, Mark, I'm asking that, why I'm asking this. Is there a book that you would recommend everybody read, and why?
Yeah, I know why you're asking this, because you've still got my book.
No,
You still have my book, Shannon.
but you told me you've got 2 copies. So
I do. I have probably more than that. There are a couple of books that I like to read, but there's one book that sticks with me for the management of a law practice and your life, right? And people are going to find this a little bit funny. You know it already. I made you look at it, right? But
Yes.
it's called The Energy Bus. And I had the book with me, but I came home to do the Zoom at home because my camera is more reliable here than it is at the office, and I left the book at the office. So I was going to give you the name. It's John Gordon, I think, is the author of the book, but it's called The Energy Bus, and it is a great book to help you manage a group of people, whether it be a small law firm, which is when I read it. It was when I was working through but it now being a small practice group, or a group of people that you have to work with inside a creditor rights group, or whatever it might be that you happen to be working in. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of the book, because I want people to kind of go look at it, but I will share with you that a lot of NFL teams have gone through this book and used it. A lot of major US corporations have had this guy come speak to help them form their different sections of their company to function this way. It's about positive. It's all about being positive. And it's kind of funny. The driver of the Energy Bus's name, what would you think that might be? It's Joy. Of course.
Joy.
It's Joy.
So you can tell I haven't read it yet. I'm so sorry.
It's Joy. And if you read the book, you're kicking people off of your bus that are energy vampires, that are negative. You don't let them ride on your bus, right? And you just want people that are going to be on your team, that are going to work positively and towards the same goals. And it's a great book to read. I highly recommend it. It's fun read. It's not deep or anything along those lines, but it is. I still look at it, Shannon, just so you know. Right.
I know. And your copy has a bunch of little stickies in it too. So I know that you reference it.
I do. I'd like to have that back someday.
You will get it. I will read that book, and I will get that book to you.
I can't believe you remembered to ask me about that, but that's good. That's good.
I learned a lot from you, Mark, while we were working together. So, Mark, do you have a mentor?
I thought you might ask that question. I have a lot of mentors. And I thought about this along along our journey, we have all kinds of people that step in and out, right? You've heard so many of my little speeches, so I feel like I talk about defining moments in people's lives, right? And when I talk about that with clients, I use it a lot in different places. And how do you get little mentors, and people creep in and out of your life at certain times for a reason, right? And I've mentioned a couple names tonight. I mean, Harry Hellings, believe it or not, was a guy that stepped into my life when I was in law school. and gave me some guidance and gave me an opportunity to open an office in his office when I didn't really know how that was going to be. That's where Fawcett & Ogle began, right? And Harry probably doesn't realize what an influence that was on me, right? Harry Rankin, who we all know and love, probably doesn't realize what an influence he had on me too. Right? Incredible, right? So you keep moving in life down the path of those people who do that to you. You know, some people may or may not know Billy Hogue from Louisville, who was a legend, so to speak, in family law, right? And he said something to me, and I know people have quoted this over and over and over, and you've heard me say this 100 times, that, and it's been changed and moved, and people use different terms, but basically Billy Hogue taught me a long time ago when I was real young, and before I became an Academy member. He and Steve Kriegshauber were incredibly influential in getting me into this group. I was the first lawyer outside of Louisville and Lexington to be admitted to the AAML in Kentucky, right? And it was at the insistence upon those two guys. But Billy Hogue told me once that little green Martians marry little green Martians, right? And I've never been able to forget that. And if you think about it, as you get further into your case, right when you think you don't have the green Martian, you're going to find out you have the green Martian, right? Yeah, so I have so many mentors and people that have helped me along my way. You know, I think we all suffer, as at least I know I do. I shouldn't speak for everybody else, from a bit of an imposter syndrome. I don't feel like, how did I get here? You know, how did I get to this part? You know, I don't know about what the truth is. We are, and we do, right? I mean, those guys that have belief in you and help you and push you, they're mentors, and they're not even knowing they're being mentors, right? And so I don't have one particular person that I can look to for that. I think if, you know, an overall life mentor, if you looked at my story on the website, which I know you've read, Shannon, it's about my grandmother, right?
Yeah.
The most influential person in my life. And it shows up there. It shows up there, right? So if I had a mentor for life, it might be her. And if I have a mentor for practice, it's probably all these guys I've mentioned along the way that don't even realize what they've done, the defining moments that they've had, and you know, in my life. It's just been, I feel so fortunate. I really do.
And what would you tell a young attorney or a new attorney what the worth of having a mentor is? I mean, I think that you've touched on some of those things already, but is there any specific thing you would tell a young or new lawyer, the reason that they should have a mentor?
Yeah, I will. Yes. Don't be afraid to reach out to. I think probably speak for every lawyer on here that's practiced family law or any kind of law for more than 10 or 15 years, you know, that we've done this. We've had help along the way by somebody that was older than us, right? I'm going to throw another name out here that, you know, one of my very first trials ever when I was brand new out of law school was a slander case. And I really didn't have any idea what I was doing, right? And quite frankly, Judge Neese in Boone County, I think, realized that I was just a lost soul. And I was getting ready to get pounded by some lawyer from Louisville who was going to defend this case, and it was going to be disgustingly ugly. And Judge Neese suggested that maybe I reach out to Doug Rouse.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know Doug Rouse, right? At that time, I was a very young man. I called Doug Rouse. Doug Rouse opened up his office. I spent 12 hours with him on a Saturday. He talked me through the case. He helped me with the jury instructions. He gave me stories to use in my opening and closing argument. He was unbelievable, so generous of his time. I've never forgot it. And I tried the case, got it to the jury. The jury deliberated for a very long time, came back with a question that wasn't so good for me. And I knew, and I got an offer to settle during that time period, and my client wouldn't let me take it, and then they got a defense verdict. But I would have never gotten that far had it not been for Doug Rouse's generosity and time that he showed me, and I've never forgotten that. And so because of that, and I think we all could add stories about that where people have helped us along the way, I never turned down an opportunity to talk to a younger lawyer. about anything, about any time. I think, Shannon, you commented once before when you were working in the office next to me, how many damn phone calls I get during the day
Oh,
sometimes
Lord.
that are simply people reaching out, you know, and I never turn those down. I mean, I thank God some of the guys that I reached out to never turned them down. And so, you know, I won't either. And so don't be afraid. I guess my advice to young people is don't be afraid to reach out, ask somebody. It's not a sign of weakness to get help. In fact, the rules of professional conduct require you to know and to be a zealous advocate and be competent to know it. But if you don't know it, it requires you to go find out.
That's
You
right.
got to go find out. So don't be afraid to ask other people for help, especially older lawyers. We all like to talk, so it's not a bad thing.
I did always wonder how you got your work done with all those calls, but I also was in your office a lot asking questions. So I have always appreciated your mentorship, Mark. What one piece of ethics related advice, Mark, would you give to new or young attorneys?
I think I may have already mentioned this a little bit, but I think it's worth restating, right? Model your practice every day with the same, so you never have to look at the code of professional courtesy or the code of professional conduct, right? You know, treat everybody with respect. Whoever is on the other side of that phone, on an attorney that's made it there, right? They have gone through law school. They have passed a bar exam. They are trying to represent people in the best way they can. Sometimes it's not always the way we think they should, right? But yet they deserve our respect, and so do the judges. You know, I don't know if we have any judges on here, but you know, it's a tremendous amount of work to not only be an attorney, work your way through, get elected to a position, and then get reelected to a position. We may not always agree with their decisions, but we owe them enough. We owe them the respect that they have earned. And I think we should treat each other with that same respect. And I think if you do that every day, you know, you don't need to study the rules of professional courtesy, because you'll be practicing it that way, and the rules of professional conduct, right? So I will say one more thing though about that. If you ever come up, if something ever smells bad or feels bad or doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. And you're going to be tested in your career. I've been tested many times in my career, right? And luckily for me, I've made the right choice a lot of those times. So it could have gone the other way had I made other choices. And you'll see those things in your career. And when it feels like it's not right, or it's not, you need to take a deep breath at that point, and you need to reach out, and you need to talk to somebody senior, somebody you trust, so, or even the ethics, even you know, seek an ethics opinion on it if it's like that. Don't be afraid to do that.
Absolutely. And one other thing on that is, if there's a mistake made, fix it. Get it done, fix it right away, and then move on instead of letting things fester.
So, you know, hey, Rob, I just looked on the chat here, and some of my dearest friends are talking about, they've never heard me talk about myself before. They're kind of excited I get to do that, right?
That's exactly where we were going to go, but I don't want to cut this short. We're fortunate we have about 7 more minutes left together. And Shannon, did you have other questions?
I had just in case questions, so I'm good to stop here if there are questions from the group. Well,
I think Stephanie Dietz wants you to regale us with stories about Center and your athletic prowess.
I know Stephanie does, because she's never heard the story, but I will. So there is one particular story, Rob, that I do like to talk about at Center College, and all my Trancy friends here are not going to be happy to hear this, right? So, Harry Rankin was one of those that I used to tell this story to on a regular basis, being a Transylvania University graduate in Lexington. But Trancy and Center were arch rivals, significantly big time arch rivals. We competed for the same kind of students. They competed on the same court. Well, I played basketball for 8 years or 4 years at center, played Transy 8 times, and I won 6 of those 8 battles, or my team did, right? But my senior year, and I took it on the head a few times from those guys, but my senior year, I happened to hit a shot from half court at the buzzer to win the home game at home. And it was so loud at our gym, you couldn't call voice plays. It was all by signal. And I kept calling my own play all the time. I was the point guard, right? I got to shoot if I wanted to. And I didn't shoot very often in college, but at that game, I took it upon myself to put up some shots. And I did hit one from about half court and made a comment in the paper about a buddy of mine who was guarding me. His name was Eddie Oakley. And the next week we played up there. And they had comments all over the gym. They hit me and I was bleeding out of the corner of my mouth after the first 30 seconds of the game. I mean, I got hit so many times, but the best thing about that shot at center is Center's alum and Trancy's alums are so embedded that you guys, I'll tie this into the law. Pierce Lively, who was a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, was from Danville, where Center College is located, and actually came into the locker room after the game. And my first introduction to a very high level jurist, Pierce Lively, was with a towel wrapped around me, leaving the shower. That's where he came in after the game. And I, I didn't even know how to respond to him. I couldn't shake his hand. I had to keep the towel on me, so, but I realized at that point how important that shot became, because every time I go back to Center now for reunions, class reunions, and it's been a while, I'll be on 40 years here coming up. I graduated at 82. So it'll be, hopefully somebody's forgotten about that shot, except me and apparently Stephanie, because I've told her so many times, right?
Well, and I'm particularly glad that you mentioned Harry Rankin. And, I understand that for a lot of the newer lawyers, watching either live today or when this video is later posted, they may not remember or had never had the privilege of knowing Harry. Mark, I want to get together with you and share some Harry Rankin stories.
I have
in the near term.
I have lots of them, Rob, and I would love to do that as well. Yeah.
He was very special. I think he gave so much of himself. I don't think he left enough for him.
I can tell you many stories. I've never knew him. He didn't have a joke or a smile.
Yeah,
right.
Indeed. And so as we're closing our time together, Mark, on behalf of the Legend Series, we just want to extend heartfelt thanks. It's terrific of you to pass on these experiences to the next generation of Northern Kentucky lawyers. Thanks for all you've done for the NKBA through the years too. And as always, for live attendees, our spectacular NKBA Executive Director, Julie Jones, she'll be sending you CLE forms and information. Feel free to reach out to me at rhudson@fbtlaw.com or to Julie with your suggestions about future programs. We really want your input, and we appreciate, we look forward to, hope the remainder of this calendar year with the program, and we hope to be, renewing it for 2023. And, as we put together the Legends for interviews, we do that in large part based on your input as members and as lawyers in the community. So thanks to all of you for joining us. For all of our live attendees, we're at the end of February 2022. Stay safe, warm, and may the demand for your services grow exponentially. So everybody have a terrific day. But before we sign off, I want to pass it back to Shannon and Mark for any final words.
Rob, I just have one comment. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, guys. I'm humbled to have been asked to even share, my journey a little bit. I was thrilled to do it. And I just want to say thank you for letting me.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Mark, for doing this. I know you're real busy right now, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. Rob, thank you for putting all these together. You're awesome. You've brought this to fruition. And of course, I can't say thanks enough to Julie and to everybody that attended today. Thanks for being there.
Have a great afternoon, folks.
Hi, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.